All right, so today we're going to talk about module 4, which is risk management. It's a very important topic, and I decided that the best way to do it was to do it in a classroom setting, so at least the students can understand as much as possible what we're trying to do here, right? So in this risk assessment, there's some key doctrines that you should understand, even in general in cybersecurity. Okay? So if you're going to be a cybersecurity analyst or expert, you must know this concept. So that's normally my information. Again, the caveat. So we have about 8 learning objectives here. I expect you to remember that, including defining risk and its importance. So we will always say that upper management is usually the one in charge of overseeing, enabling, and supporting the IT infrastructure and organization. And part of this also includes what's called effective risk management, right? This is a quote from Sun Tzu that says, if you know your enemies, you know the enemy, and you know yourself, you did not get the result of 100 battles. But if you know yourself, but not your enemy, for every victory gained, you will also suffer a defeat. And but if you know neither your enemy nor yourself, you will succumb to every battle. It just means you know what's going on in your system. So part of the risk management framework is also what is risk, which is risk identification, understanding your current level of risk, your risk analysis, evaluating your risk. So when you're doing the risk management, you need to understand what exactly is my company's risk treatment, what we call risk control, what have I decided to do, what have also risk assessment, risk identification. So this will be a knowledge check for you, right? You can answer this by slowing down the slide and looking at the answer. Again, with the risk management, it is not a very simple operation, but it's also very vital in your organization. This would be an example of the risk management framework and process that you utilize. So we have 5 key stages in any kind of risk management framework. This will include executive governance, support, framework design, implementation, monitoring, and then here we want continuous improvement. As part of this, community of interest are responsible for things like evaluating current risk control. So with the risk management policy for every single organization, it's much like what we call enterprise information security policy, the ESP, right? It's really like a strategic document for us to look at and to see what we're trying to do in our governance. So most risk management policies have different sections, like including purposes and scope, all the way down to development guidelines. So when you design, you can put your team together and see what you're doing, right? And then, but all of this, the whole thing we're trying to figure out is what exactly is our risk appetite, meaning what amount of risk can we tolerate? It's like food, how much can I eat? So you will get terms like residual risk. Residual risk would be the amount of the risks that is left after you implemented any kind of security controls. And of course, risk tolerance is what we refer to as the risk threshold. This would be another thing for you to look at. When I'm doing implementation, they could include everything like a desk check, a pilot test, or we call it phased approach. Right. I'm going to go to what we call the processes, the tasks that is involved in the risk management process. This will include identifying our risk, of course, analyzing our risk, and evaluating our uncontrolled risk against our business strategy. What I really want to get to for you is stuff like a sample list framework, a risk management preparation process. You can look at this publication, SP 800-30, which allows you to identify the purpose, scope, and the assessment. But in our risk identification, one of the things we want to do is also identify our assets, classify them, and also categorize them to for useful groups. So this is a sample of the assets system. You have people, process, procedures, and your data that identified. And here we're deciding like the components. In the case of, say, the data, I'll be looking at data information, transmission, processing, and storage, which we call data in transit, data at rest, and data that is being processed. We can go through this. But what I really want to focus is how do we quantify our risk? We really quantify our risk either by using a calculation, simple risk calculation. The risk is probability, or in other words, likelihood times the impact. That is a quantified risk assessment, as opposed to a qualitative risk assessment that will tell you that the risk is high, low, medium, and you now decide how to treat it, right? So this is part of like prioritizing your risk or ranking of your risk. So when you're performing risk identification, this question is asking which of these steps is performed last. Usually the last step is prioritized. So I've already assessed it, I've already quantified it, maybe assigned a value, then I could decide how do I decide to treat them, right? This table just tells them about a weighted analysis of risk. But what I really want to talk about is maybe threat assessment, right? And really also how do you decide to identify the risk? So vulnerability assessment is part of what you should do. Of course, the bad guy, the threat actor, do this as an initial step of recon, but you should do this to prevent yourself from being exposed. And there are tools, even open source tools like OpenPath, that enables you to do a risk assessment, right? So this would be like a vulnerability assessment of EMC router, which we now call a screen subnet at the router that's right there. So look at this sheet here. I can look at thread 1, thread 2, and I can access it in here. Right? It's a similar worksheet, portion of the thread, right? So when I'm doing a risk analysis, I'm looking for the relative risk for each vulnerability, and then I'm going to, of course, assign a risk rating or a score to each of them. So I would decide what I'm going to do about it, right? This would be this generic risk module with what we call key risk factors. So how do you decide the likelihood of threat event? So this is likelihood is obviously the overall rating. The likelihood of occurrence could be a weighted risk factor depending on how you treat it, right? So this would be a risk likelihood treatment on the ranking. Asset value, right? And look at the risk impact. So again, I'm doing it because the calculation of the quantified risk is impact multiplied by the likelihood, right? If I live in Miami and I know that I might have a hurricane, or maybe the likelihood of an earthquake is something possible, so I'm going to calculate it. What I'm going to do is put it like something like placing my risk rank and risk evaluation, right? So residual risk, just remember residual risk, which means the risk that left out of it, dependent on this is there's only a few about 4 ways to treat the risk. You can either mitigate the risk, to solve it. You can transfer the risk like buying insurance or outsourcing. You can accept the risk. And then, of course, finally, you can avoid the risk. These are all risk strategies that you can do based on your risk appetite. That question, right? So the main concept I want you to understand from this module is vulnerability assessment, risk analysis, both quantified and qualitative, and then finally the 4 approaches to risk treatment: mitigation, transference, acceptance, and avoidance. Right? You can look at, but of course, if I'm trying to calculate, you should know this formula. This formula is annualized loss expectancy is the single loss expectancy multiplied by annualized rate of occurrence. That is the single loss expectancy is the asset value multiplied by the exposure value. This is one difference, right? So just know those formulas in the risk management. You got the ISO 27 and 105 and then 31,000 for risk management. Go through this and look at this chart. The point is that what I want you to know from this chapter is just take a few key issues. Like there's a video here. I want you to also look at the video. But what I really want you to do is say to yourself, what is the risk? What's the vulnerability assessment? How do I calculate risk? Quantify or qualitative? How do I decide as an organization in terms of what I'm going to do about risk? Which is either mitigate the risk, I'm going to transfer the risk, or I'm going to decide that I want to just avoid the risk altogether. So please subscribe to the video, send me any question that you may have. I'm happy to answer that for you.